Hello and welcome to Dish Shelved with Adam White. Last week I did a book, Killer Flies for Garb August. Uh, I wanted to do at least one to take part in that. But coming up here on the channel, I've got another project I'm kind of looking at. Not necessarily a project per se. I don't want to go out and say everything I do is a project because it seems like it anymore. But I want to look into books about uh, paranormal detectives or occult investigators, occult detectives, whatever you want to call them. And I want to take a look at books dealing with characters like that. Now, there's a lot of old ones and there's some newer ones. Uh, and so that's something I'm going to be looking into over the next few months. I'm not going to do it necessarily every week, but it's just something that I want to explore because the mood struck my fancy to to read some paranormal investigator stuff and some urban fantasy coming up, and because I just again the mood struck me, and maybe some Terry Pratchett too. I've never read him, and I like uh, fantasy and I like humor, so I don't know why I've never read any of his books, but I thought I'd start at the beginning and check those out too. So expect that coming up on the channel. Anyway, the first book I read for this paranormal investigator thing only kind of loosely fits the bill. I wasn't sure about it entirely before I read it. Um, but it's called Perfect Circle by Sean Stewart. And it came out in 2004. And let me read you what it says about it on the back. William Dead Kennedy has problems. He's haunted by family, by dead people with unfinished business, and by those perfect pop songs that you can't get out of your head. He's a 32-year-old Texan still in love with his ex-wife. He just lost his job at Petco for eating cat food. His air conditioning is broken, there's no good music on the radio, and he's been dreaming about ghost roads. When Will's cousin calls in the middle of the night about a dead girl haunting his garage, helping him out seems like the easy way to make $1,000. But nothing is ever that simple, especially when family is involved. Will's mother is planning a family reunion of epic proportions. Will's ex-wife is married to a former Marine who knows Will is bad news. Will's 12-year-old daughter Megan thinks he needs someone to look after him. And recently his dead relatives seem to want something from him. Sometimes a guy is haunted for a really good reason. And from what I'd read about the book, obviously William Dead Kennedy, and they call him DK sometimes too, uh, can see dead people, and they appear in black and white to him. But he's gotten so used to them that half the time he doesn't know whether he's looking at somebody that's dead or alive. There's a kind of a funny scene later on in the book where they're at a restaurant and he's giving an order to a waiter, and the other two people at the table look at him like, "What are you doing?" And then he looks at the waiter again and realizes he's in black and white, so it was a dead waiter uh, that he was giving an order to, and so he had to kind of just say, "Oh, sorry about that." So I mean, there's things like that in there that are kind of funny that happen throughout the course of the book. But usually the ghosts are no laughing matter. Uh, the job that he does for his cousin ends up totally differently than he thought it was going to go. And really, in the first part of the book, the interaction with his cousin and uh, the the ghost that might be at his house ends up in a really interesting way, and it's almost what would be the climax of a book that you'd read that was, in a story like this. And so it's almost like a climax of the book happening in the first, fourth of it. And then the rest of the book is kind of the fallout of that. And he has to deal with his family, and his mom and dad are kind of always worried about him because they don't really know this business about seeing dead people. And it kind of gets out that he can see dead people in a funny way. And people want to hire him because they think he's $1,000 a day to find your ghosts and get rid of them. And so he does have a few of those encounters that he goes out for in the book, but that's about as far as the paranormal investigating goes. It really is just a subplot of this book. Uh, I thought going into it there was going to be more of that than there was, but it didn't really matter because you like the character William Kennedy, and you get to know all the other characters in it: his ex-wife, his daughter, his ex-wife's husband, Don, the ex-Marine, his parents, his sisters, his neighbor that he's really good friends with, and nothing can seem to go right for William Kennedy. As if seeing ghosts wasn't bad enough, everything in his life just goes to crap. And so you've got him dealing with that. He can't hold down a job. And there's some funny ways that his jobs end. And it really goes in directions that I didn't see coming with the ghost, because he's sort of haunted by them without even realizing it. And it affects his mind, and it affects his relationships with other people. Some people believe he can see the ghost, some people don't believe it. But in the context of the book, he very much can see ghosts. And they do have an effect on the living. And he's just kind of caught in the middle. And another one is his cousin, but she's dead, but she only appears to him in mirrored surfaces. And he can't ever figure that out as to why he only can see her through a reflection. And that's kind of a running theme too. It's called Perfect Circle after an REM song. And I'm not familiar with the album. I've listened to plenty of REM, but I'm just not familiar with that album off the top of my head. I played the sample on iTunes, but I didn't really see the connection. I guess I would have to probably sit and listen to the song a few times in its entirety to get the gist of why he called it Perfect Circle. But there is a circular motion to the plot. He really wants to be a dad to his kid, but he only gets to see her once every 2 weeks. And, stuff happens with that. And he really tries, but he's really got this whole seeing ghost thing hanging over him. And it's not a good thing. And the ending was kind of downbeat until the very, very end. But just the last 2 pages or so was a little bit seemed overly religious to me. And that was not the tone that I got in the rest of the book. It just seemed, almost, I don't want to say too much about it, but it just seemed like there was a lot of religious undertones in it when there wasn't in the rest of the book. And so I'm left a little confused by that about the ending, but overall I really enjoyed the book. I had a hard time putting it down. I mean, I read it in 2 days, but um, I thought about it the whole time in between I was reading it because it was such a good book. And Sean Stewart's a really good writer. He's got really accessible prose, and his characters are all fantastic. You really get invested in them. And he really just, he gets to the point. He doesn't go off on tangents about stuff. And he really takes it into some dark and unexpected directions in this, which were really interesting to read about. And anyway, really good book. I really do recommend it. Uh, I'm sure it's still in print. I didn't check, and it's almost certainly on Kindle. But again, I should have checked that before I did this. But anyway, it's a really good book. I really enjoyed it. And again, the thing with the ending isn't a deal killer for me. It just, I'm just still processing it. But really good book. Sean Stewart, Perfect Circle. He's written several other novels as well that I have 4 or 5 of. So I will definitely read him again. And I just highly recommend it. And thanks for hanging out with me this week. And I will see you guys next week.